Okay, welcome everyone. People are logging in now. This is the Leadership for Change, Moving from Ideas to Action webinar. It is our final webinar in this 5-part series. So as you're logging in, if you can just let us know, type into the chat box and let us know where you're coming from. Also, be sure that your chat is going out to all panelists and attendees. So you might need to change your drop-down box. Hello, Jen from Tucson, and Leslie from Long Island, Candy from Fresno. Seeing some familiar names. That's why I love this series. See who's coming back to us. Excellent.
I love that it's every side of the country, Florida to Washington.
Mm-hmm. Really.
Anne from Connecticut.
Yeah. Angie from Vancouver. Tanya.
Susan from Boulder.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to start this introduction. My name is Meredith Burks. I'm the Product Marketing and Customer Experience Manager at Red Leaf Press. And this is a series we're doing with Fiona Stewart, Cassandra O'Neill, and Monica Brinkerhoff. It's built off of their books, Fiona's book, Building Together, and Cassandra and Monica's 5 Elements of Collective Leadership. So Fiona is the Program Director of Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, a network of partnerships of childcare resource and referrals and alternate payment agencies from across the county. Fiona holds a bachelor's degree from Cornell University and a master's from Pacific Oaks College. And she was recognized as a master leader from Exchange Leadership Initiative. And in her book, Building Together, Fiona shares a lot of stories throughout the book from her own professional experience in the field and her own leadership work. And then Cassandra O'Neill is the CEO of Leadership Alchemy, and she's worked with over 200 organizations, including libraries, schools, government agencies, foundations, and nonprofits. And then Monica Brinkerhoff is the Organization and Employee Development Director at Child Parent Centers, Inc., which is the Head Start grantee for Southeastern Arizona. And their book, again, is 5 Elements of Collective Leadership, which was a NACCE member book. The goal for this series has really been to provide ideas and support for your leadership journey and working for change. And since it is the last one of the series, if you've liked this series, I encourage you to check out those 2 books. They're both excellent resources to kind of continue this journey. And we're gonna go ahead and dive in and get started. And I'm gonna pass it over to Monica.
Yeah, well, we're really looking forward to today. This is the last webinar in our series. And so actually before we got started, we were just saying how much we appreciated the opportunity and how much fun we've had just being able to work together. And it really, we've said this in prior webinars, but it's only been as fun and as effective as it is with all of your participation in the chat and everything that you bring to the table and to the webinar. So I think before we get started, we'd like to thank all of you who've participated in the past and for all your comments and your engagement. It's been really great. So this is really just a visual to anchor us in the work and the ideas for the webinar, and really just starting with the idea that leadership starts with yourself, and then there are strategies from there that can be applied to a team and an organization, and finally the community, which we will be focusing on for today's webinar. So our guiding question for the series is, what's the relationship between leadership and change? Really with the understanding that leadership requires us to be aspirational, and if you have aspirations, you're necessarily going to be working toward change. The webinars are designed to be standalone, so if this is your first time joining us, it's just fine and welcome. We're going to do a quick little recap so you can see what we've talked about on prior webinars before we dive into today's content. So let's go to the next slide. So really in the first webinar, we talked about what we believe leadership to be. And we talked about that leadership is not about your position or title. It's about staying optimistic, having a vision that's aspirational, that it's really an active state. And when we can work collaboratively with others, it really can be transformational to the work. And then in the second webinar, we talked about Rick Hanson's work on red brain, and green brain. This was really based on the concept of how neuroscience affects our ways of thinking and our behavior, and how some strategies to overcome the negativity bias that we have that was necessary to us to survive, but now can kind of stay in the way of some of the things that are needed for change in leadership, like curiosity and risk-taking and being open. So we also talked about the concept of just staying perseverance with joy, and that idea of just coming back to it with a sense of joy and purpose. And then finally, in webinars 3 and 4, we had some similar ideas of really just how do you engage other people, whether it's in a team or in your organization. How do you receive their ideas? How do you make them feel honored? And how that can expand the success across your team or your organization, whatever the role is. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cassandra, and she's going to get us started with today.
All right, thank you. So today we're going to dive into our content around transforming communities, and we're going to review successes that people have had in embracing and engaging others across your organization. So get ready to type into the chat box, please. As Monica said, we rely on that, and we asked people at the last webinar to brainstorm some things they could try between the last webinar and today. And then we're going to talk about how to extend the successes that you have in your organization internally, outwardly, through partnerships with other organizations in the community. And then thinking about how to design experiments for you to try new things in partnership with other organizations. So even though we won't be having another webinar in this series, we'd still like to end this one with asking you to think about what would you like to try that you thought of or learned about today. And then you can tell us what you're going to try, and we will enjoy that. And go ahead and go to the next slide. So given that those are our learning goals for the webinar today, we'd love to hear from you. What are your learning goals? What would you like to learn today? If you think about it, imagine it's the end of the webinar and you're like, yes, that's exactly what I hope to learn. What was that thing? Or what questions do you have about transforming communities? So go ahead and type into the chat box what your learning goals are for the webinar today. And you can also go ahead and type in things that you've tried and how has it gone. So we'll just wait for a little bit to hear.
It's that idea of wait time.
Oh, okay. So Jen Maney typed in, would love to expand beyond the library to reach out to our online customers.
Nice. I noticed some like kind of bigger, broader thinking in that.
Yeah.
Out of the box.
And it's true that we have to think about collaboration and communication. It's, you know, when we talk about communities, it's not just our own little neighborhoods anymore. It's really our online, you know, statewide, nationwide, global, even, you know, presence out there in terms of how we communicate, especially in a day and age of Twitter and everything else.
Yeah, and
how
I'll
we
just
collaborate, how do we communicate with others?
Yeah, as we kind of continue, we've got a couple more coming in, but I'm just going to mention, I mean, this whole series was a collaboration and building a community. I mean, again, I've seen the same names every month, and it's been great to get to hear from them. And it's really a new way for us not only to, of course, promote your guys' work and provide real value to people is what we hoped, but it's been sort of new for us doing these webinar series from Red Leaf's perspective, and it's been really great to see. And I'm, we want to always promote our, wonderful print resources, but this has been really exciting for us. And it looks like
we've been in that kind of online space paradigm of collaboration. All of us, the four of us that you can see on your screen here, we're all in different states across the country. So
exactly, and how do you reach so broadly, so wide? So we've got a couple, how can I best manifest our vision as a hub convener of partners?
I would like to learn strategies about inclusion of all partners to enhance the supports for diverse communities that I serve. Great goal.
Yeah.
All right, I think that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I like Angel wrapping my mind around defining who my community is. I think that's a super important place to start. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. All right.
Here's one who wrote, how I can best manifest our vision as a hub convener of partners. A great lofty goal.
All right. So we talked about bright spots last time in terms of in your organization, what are the bright spots? What's happening that you'd want to have happen again or more often? We talked about something that seems obvious but often isn't, because we kind of, with that negativity bias that Monica mentioned, we sometimes skip over the things that are going well and our attention is focused on the things that aren't. However, when we redirect it to what's going well, this is often the best way to think about how to do these things more and have more success. And this again applies to communities, thinking about what is going well in the community or communities that you are part of. And again, same idea, what would you want to have more of? So if you're, one of your communities is, your families that come to your school, if you're in a school, or, the community members in the library that are using things and checking out ebooks but aren't coming into one of the buildings. So again, thinking about what things are happening there already that are great that you want to have happen more, that you want to bring in more areas. So if you have somebody that's super engaged, what's led to that, and how can you, make more of those kinds of relationships, those people that, there's always a couple of people that are just so enthusiastic, and it's like, oh, wouldn't it be like if everybody was like this? Well, you can actually help everybody to be like that by recreating kind of what was involved. So really, again, just think about whatever it is that you're, if you thought about what's the best thing that ever happened with our, community or our parents' night or our staff meeting, and then think about when do we interact with other people from other organizations, like, if you're in a city or a county and you're working with other people that have those same goals. So again, we're going to talk a little bit more about different types of community collaboration. So the next slide is kind of an icon of what it might look like. So thinking of the theme, our whole webinar series, we talked about everyone identifying goals and then sharing them and seeing which ones are in common. And so this is a kind of visual of how you can do it with your organization. And you can think about different partners as those other circles. And then you can think about what are your shared goals. And this is, again, something that is a great starting point. And even though sometimes people think, oh, it's so obvious, it actually doesn't mean that it's not necessary or worthwhile to make it explicit, to really say, what is it that we all want? And that is really the driver, that the shared goals in the middle is really then the driver of the work. And so in the next slide, what I showed you is the same image and a link to this toolkit. So I developed this several years ago, and it's literally a step-by-step, how do you think about identifying partners, and there's categories, existing partners, previous partners, and potential partners. And then really step-by-step, how do you figure out what to do? So if you have, if you already have an existing coalition, that's one case. If you don't have one and you want to think about creating one, that's another situation. And then the other situation is just kind of maybe all the groups that you partner with aren't going to be doing the same thing at the same time, but you have certain things you do with one group and certain things that you do with another group. And so this is really a step-by-step. It's very user-friendly. We piloted it with the health departments in the state of Arizona and have shared it with lots of different organizations, libraries included. And it's really, again, thinking about when you go out to talk to people, creating that broad goal, something like increasing health or increasing literacy, something that might line up with what other people are doing. And so, like I said, you can download it. There's a part 1 and a part 2, and it will give you very, very specific prompts for staff, because when we started working with people, they were like, we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do. So it's designed for exactly that. And even if you've done it before, it's just helpful to have like an organizer. So again, that focus is really specifically about looking at what's going on, who might be a potential partner, and how do you reach out and talk to them about the things that you would need to find out, do we have shared goals, and what are they? So
can I just add a really fast thing that I think
go for
now
it.
more than ever, early childhood, as a field, we're finding ourselves at the table with other initiatives. And, like here in Tucson, we have like a kind of an anti-poverty initiative. And there's, because of the growing recognition of how critical early childhood is, we're really finding ourselves part of these larger coalitions. So that's a really good opportunity to say, how does our role in the field contribute to the shared goal?
Yeah, and if many of you have heard about collective impact, which has been around that term for about 10 years now, and it's basically the same idea of pulling together organizations that are working independently and see what they can do working collaboratively. All right, and so the next slide, one of the things that is super important in collaboration is this whole idea of empathy. So instead of just assuming like everyone should be doing this because it's the right thing to do, or everyone that cares about kids should be doing whatever this thing is, which is kind of some of the mindsets that were around a while ago, before people really started noticing that the things that we want to create, the successes, are so complicated now that we really do need to reach out. And so thinking about, what does that mean? And we have a colleague who is a great resource, has this great article. There's actually more questions in her article that you can use when you have meetings of collaborations or potential ones. And so here's just a few of them to really think about what excites you about this collaboration, and what are you feeling fearful or worried about related to this collaboration, which is something that, it's good to get it on the table. Like if people are worried, and if they're like, well, I'm worried I'm not going to have a job if, my organization doesn't get funded again, well, that's really going to get in the way if you don't know that that's happening. So getting that out on the table, and then thinking about what questions do people have, because again, we often assume like, well, we just had the PowerPoint where we said what we're going to do and the mission and vision. What do you mean you have a question? But that's just not enough, just an exploration of really, what does this mean? What does this mean for us as individuals and organizations? So we put that website up there, pauseforchange.com, and you can dive into that if you have some interest in reading the article and seeing the whole list of questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Fiona.
And I just really quickly want to say we will have all those links in the follow-up, in the recap as well. So if you've missed it, that's okay. We'll send it out to you.
Hey, thanks, Meredith, and thanks, Cassandra. So as picking up where Cassandra left off, sort of what are you excited about, and what are you concerned about, and what might be you fearful about? One thing to start with is that whatever the situation, whatever relationships you're building with partners, or whatever collaboration you're doing going forward, the dynamics around power are going to come up. And it's one of those elephants in the room. We don't always like to talk about it, but there's always power in every situation and in any relationship. And we've talked before about seeing things as opportunities, because change is going to mean something's going to be different, and that can be scary, but it can also mean opportunities. So acknowledging the power structures that are there gives you the opportunity to think about them, to talk about them, to work with them, and maybe even to think about how they can be different. So and I've talked a little bit here about that there's formal power, which sometimes we can't do as much about. Institutional power, and organizations have power. There's decision-making structures, and there's boards, and there's governance, and there's resources and grants and all those kinds of things that we have to kind of work within. And then there's also informal power, some of which we think about a lot, I think, like race and class and age. But it can also mean things like communication skills. Some people are more confident than others. Some people talk more. Some people talk less. Charisma, things like that are also a form of power that might be in the room. But one place to start is to recognize that you yourself have power in every situation. So it's always a good idea to start by understanding your own personal power. What skills do you have? What strength do you bring to this work? What are your views? What are things that get you excited about the work? That's all a part of the power that you bring. So that's a great place to start, is to understand the strength within yourself. And then next slide. And then if you really want to think towards that power that you can have to transform communities, to work collaboratively and collectively in new ways, and to be working towards change and towards that shared vision that Cassandra talked about, then the goal is to strive to share power, to really ensure that there's an equitable playing field in this work, and that all have a voice as you're thinking together and thinking collaboratively about your shared vision and about your goals that you want to be working on together. So a place to start is to focus on the common purpose. Why are we all here? What's our shared vision? What are we working towards? And if you really take the time to think through some of those power dynamics and the decision making and the communication in the room and accountability towards each other, that should help to start lead you toward a vision of equity and more shared power and ensuring that all have a voice. So it's worth it to sort of take the time to acknowledge who's in the room, what are the power that we all bring, what's our own personal power, what are our goals, and how is this all going to play out in terms of working towards our shared goals. So the next slide. So value the strengths of each community partner, right? Each community partner, both the organization itself and the people who work in that organization, are also going to have strengths and power. So it might be a place to start to think about what are the strengths and skills that we all bring to this collaborative effort. How are we going to work together to transform the community using our skills and using all of the different power tools that we have at the ready? And then if you use those personal and community power tools and skills to help accomplish your goals and make decisions and build alliances, that's going to lead towards change. It's going to lead towards your community working in a way that it hasn't before. Because you've changed the nature of how each organization uses its skills and uses its strengths and uses its power to work towards those shared goals that you've articulated.
I think a good example of this is the Head Start model. Part of the model is that each grantee needs to conduct a community assets and needs report. So it's really looking at what's going well and what are the gaps that need to be filled. And it really does focus, as grantees, we're supposed to focus on collaborating with the community. And I was reading some information about the history of Head Start and the way it was designed. And there's a whole aspect where we have to have a non-federal share contribution. And the purpose of that was to make sure we had community members engaged in the work. So Head Start is a really good model of building on community strengths.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you see that sometimes, like in RFPs and grant applications now, they're asking you to seek out community partners. And here in California, all of our QRIS work is, we're asking to build consortia and work towards more and more partnership with our community partners. So yeah, you see that a lot. Really building on the strengths and sharing resources and sharing ideas, working towards really change at a community level. Absolutely. So, and to adopt that theory of change, it's really about thinking together and being future thinking, striving towards those better outcomes, right? So acknowledging the power, but using it to work towards the greater good that you're all trying to strive for. And be guided by that shared purpose and that shared vision, and be future thinking. And this takes time, as we all know, but I think to get that sort of paradigm shift of transforming things towards change, sometimes it does take taking some steps with each other to think about power and think about strength and think about skills and think about how things could be different before you really strive forward towards towards those better outcomes. Okay, next slide. But we also wanted to, because this is our last webinar with you, we wanted to make sure to also remind you of a few things kind of going into the future. And one is to take the time to celebrate progress, because there are milestones along the way, and they might even be small. Even just bringing partners together in a room that haven't talked to each other as much as a big milestone. That's a huge step. So, gather feedback along the way. Check on your goals and your benchmarks, and assess how things are going. What's been the impact of your shared efforts, and notice those and celebrate that progress. Acknowledge each other. Acknowledge the strengths that you have and how you've already begun to work towards change. Those are huge differences, and transforming communities and transforming the work that you do together is exciting. So take note of that along the way. That'll help to move the work forward and sustain it.
Yeah, I think that's great, Fiona. I'm just going to chime in real quick. I think that's so important too, because even in marketing, say, sometimes when you check in on those goals and you're not seeing the results maybe you wanted at that point, there's still time to pivot versus getting to the end and being like, well, we don't know why that didn't work. I'm not going to say failed, but didn't work the way that we thought it would. So I think that is great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can add really quick that Cassandra and I in our book talked a lot about the importance of reflection as you go. And I think that really speaks to that last slide. If you don't have processes set in for regular reflection and time to stop to say, hey, how are we doing? We wanted to do this. Are we there yet? And if not, why not? That's really the key to making sure you're measuring your progress, and then being able to pivot if needed.
Right. To check in and see if anything needs to be changed, but also to say, hey, we actually did that part too. We did successfully come up with an idea and start to implement it or start to do something different. Yeah. And then to sustain it, we've talked a lot about leadership as a collective and collaborative activity, and making sure that others are part of it. And part of that, I think, of leadership is also about nurturing other leaders who are coming up with you. Because like we talked about before, everybody has strengths, right? Everybody has power. Everybody has different skills that they're going to lend to all of this work. So seek those folks out and help them successfully accomplish their work, because that'll also help you sustain it. Because you want to identify folks who are going to help carry that vision forward. And it might not be you. It might be others that are ready to step up in some new and different ways. I think about those geese who fly in that big V, and they say that there's always one at the apex, right, who's leading. But from time to time, that one will drop back, and another one will step up and take the lead. And that makes me think of that, is that leadership is really a team effort. And we want to support each other along the way, because it might be us that sustain one part, but it might be somebody else who's sustaining something else or carries a vision forward in new ways. So seek those folks out and nurture each other to keep the work moving forward.
Yeah, I would just like to add in that.
Monica.
Oh, I was just going to add something to build on what Fiona was just saying. Almost every time I'm presenting or working with the group, I think I mentioned this before in another webinar, but I'm just going to mention it again. We have these people that have these positions of leadership, and they feel overwhelmed, and they feel like there's all this responsibility on them, and that even though there's other people around, it often feels like it's more work instead of less work, right? And then they want to know, like, what can I do to help other people, step up and really, step in. And then you have all these other people that are not in those positions, but are feeling underutilized and want to do more. And then they're always asking, how can I get to do more? How can I get to try more? It's like, well, why don't you well, then I started to realize what was going on. I'm like, have you asked your, supervisor that if there are any opportunities? And they always say no. And so I don't think of doing it, but look around you, and if you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I have to all this more work I have to do, I have these more people to deal with, think about even a few of them are probably sitting there thinking, how can I do more? And they're probably not going to say anything. And so you can seek them out, or seek other ways to bring them together, because they are there. Like, there is not a single meeting that there are not people sitting there wanting to do more, but feel like they don't know how, or maybe they have tried to talk to their supervisor and maybe they didn't get a very positive response because it was a bad time or something, and then they are afraid to ever ask again. So really just use your magic glasses of who might be sitting there dying to help and take a step up.
Right. I mean, it goes back to where we started, that leadership is not about position or title necessarily, or what kind of, sort of inherent formal power you have, but really about that ability to work towards change and to take some steps in your own ways to realize shared goals.
Yeah, I think part of it too is that we're always bumping up against those old mental models of leadership, and that has to be somebody that's in charge or accountable. I'm on a subcommittee of a larger coalition, and we were doing some strategic planning the other day, and our subcommittee has been totally self-organized. It's a small group of people who are all interested in it, and there's not one person that sort of does it all. We just take turns with the notes, and we decide together, like, okay, who wants to help with this project? And so it's pretty organic. And in the larger coalition meeting, they wanted everyone to decide who's the chair of the subcommittees. And in our report out, I said, well, we have a shared leadership model. And someone said, well, what does that mean? And so really, to me, it really spoke to that mental model of it really to be thinking about self-organization and kind of the sort of the local level or shared leadership is really, it really takes a lot of undoing some old mental models. And it can feel radical sometimes. So even if you're not the person that's in the leader role and you're the one sitting there thinking, I want to be more involved, know that sometimes it's just asking the question and getting in there and having the courage to do something that might be a little, radical.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it's so critical, too, to sustain this work that, especially here in the early child education field, I mean, we got a long ways to go still. We're getting there. There's a lot more motion, like Monica mentioned at the beginning. It's getting a lot more attention than it has in the past, but there's a lot of work to do. So there's definitely times for a lot of people to roll up their sleeves and take some leadership on, but I think there's also opportunities for us all to support each other going through this work and to sustain it.
Yep.
We need partners and leaders around us to help us all keep going.
Yeah, we need connection.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that brings us to kind of some of a nice time to pause. We've done a lot of reflecting and we're ready to hear from you. So I'm just going to read these questions, and then while I'm reading them, I'd like you to kind of get your juices flowing because we'll ask you to type into the chat box. So the first question is, just think about what are some things that you can do to develop shared aspirations with other organizations in your community? What are some community partners that you could include? What are some things that you could work on together? So we're going to go ahead and just ask you to type into the chat box. And I think I'd encourage you, even if you are thinking, maybe it's not community partners, there's always a way to engage with another partner or agency or organization. And so just really allow yourself to be courageous and think out of the box. And I'll ask you to go ahead and type into the chat box. And we'll go to the next slide while we're doing a little wait time.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Jen's learning goal about community members that use the library website. And I was thinking there's so many partners that the library works with for in-person events. And I was wondering if they have any for those people that are online. And if not, maybe there's some way to be creative about connecting them. I didn't really have any specific ideas, but I know, anybody, like, I don't know what you're trying to get them to do, but, offering some kind of incentives or something, or, special opportunities that somebody that's using that online website would feel like excited about, like, oh yeah, that would make me, participate, or even just fill out a survey. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick survey. Yeah. Okay, so we have someone, Monica, how do you work with the group when you may have a couple members with power that may not see things the same way as the majority of the group? The downfall is the group doesn't feel united. So Monica, there's a really good tool from, so the Thinking Collaborative in Colorado, they do a thing called Adaptive Schools. There's a book, but there's something called the Norms of Collaboration. And I think those can be really helpful when you're working with a coalition to help people see, start to see this, start to begin to talk about how they behave in the group. And it can, I think it could be very helpful with group not feeling united. Let's see, Cassandra's familiar with that work too, so I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Well, I mean, it does take the people that are in those positions to have it drawn to their attention what the effect of their behavior is. And oftentimes, I mean, that is not an easy ask. So those norms are kind of bringing up ways that we want everyone to behave, and they involve things like pausing and asking questions that are open-ended. So it is a good thing that you can say you want everyone to do and then ask those people to model it. And so if they're able to, then they're going to be able to hear from some of the people directly if they're not in agreement with what, you know, if there's diverse opinions, which there always are. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be out in the open or not.
I think that idea of open-ended questions is really great because it's a way to take it off of it being personal. It's just more like, well, what if? Or I wonder. Or how might that work? And what might be some challenges or some barriers with that, or what might be some opportunities? Just really questions that'll get somebody thinking that and reflecting that might start to show that maybe some of those ideas, you know, aren't going to work out when you try to play them out, when you try to think through the steps of implementing it, or you know, what players might be needed to carry that work out, or whatever those questions might be. It'll get everybody kind of thinking together, and it doesn't, like I said, it keeps it from being personal. It makes it more about let's ponder the ideas here.
Okay, I see a chat from Sabrina that she's working with some ECE stakeholders and meeting quarterly, and that they're planning to meet next week, and how to really make the ECE community more visible during Week of the Young Child. Yeah, so you know, using those opportunities that are sort of national recognition days to get out there. That's great. Let's see. Reflective activities that help drive in the values. Yep. And okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and, go ahead.
Zoom collaboration is such a great idea because it doesn't require people to drive, and it can really, if you're not doing anything, it can be a big boost, or if you're doing something, it can be a help in between.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, Jen replying to Sabrina using Zoom rather than traveling, that's great. This is what we're using today, so it works really well for meetings, and there are free options just depending on how many people you have in it. So I would.
Yeah, it's a really great resource. Okay, I think maybe we need to move on. I'm trying to watch the time. This is so fun though. We could just go on and on and on. So just a reminder that we do have all of the webinars are recorded, so you can go back, and we've really loved just seeing the chat. So if you haven't checked out the chats that are available on PDF, they're really great to check out. You can kind of see what other people's ideas and suggestions were. So let's go on to this next final reflection slide. And at this point, we'd just really love to hear from you. What's your takeaway? What are you taking from today's conversation? We always like to hear if there was anything specific that you found helpful. So let's give a little pause here and ask you to type into the chat just something you're taking away from today's conversation.
And also, if you have any thoughts about the series or actions you're going to take or ideas you're going to try.
We haven't yet started to talk about what next, but I think we're going to debrief as a group soon. And so if there's anything specific that you'd like to hear or you know, have us. I feel like we're conversation hosts instead of teachers. So if there's anything that you'd like to be talking about in a similar space, and any conversations that we can host together, feel free to put those in the chat too, so that we can see what we can do about planning for that.
And here's a comment from Jen saying that they're planning their next team day completely based on this series. Great. We're going to work on shared goals together, look at bright spots over an afternoon. That's great.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
I know, just even, I love Jen's just talking about bright spots and weekly meetings. That's a great question to get kicked off. What was a bright spot in our work last week?
Oh yeah.
Nice. You end on it. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, ending on a high note. And you could even do it in the beginning, start on a high note too, and just see how that changes the tone of a meeting. I love starting with a positive. Yeah.
Great. So I love the
Nice.
comment from Susan about having been asked if she needed help and saying no, but then thinking about reaching out and setting up opportunities for people that are wanting to help to be able to. Yeah, because every project isn't the right one, but just that noticing that, like, oh, I'm going to keep in mind something that person can help with if this wasn't the right one.
So a really great comment from Gail there, that just finding today's resources helpful for the, you know, working out the backroom politics. One other thing that I forgot to mention about the norms is there's also an assessment. So you can assess yourself on the norms, and then have group members assess the group on the norms. And it's really can uncover a lot of patterns in thinking. And then Leslie said that she's used the content to reflect on her practice. So thank you all for these comments, are really, really helpful. And
Yeah, this is great to see. So, okay, we do just have a few more minutes left. So all three of these wonderful people are going to be at the McCormick conference in April. They've provided their contact information here. And again, we'll follow up with all of these links. These are going to be posted on redleafpress.org/webinars is where you can find all of our recorded webinars. Did you guys have any final comments?
Yeah, we'll be at McCormick in April in Chicago area, and we have 2 workshops the 3 of us are doing together. So definitely have some chances to meet us if you're there.
come say hello, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, and just a final reminder that these webinars are built off of books, off of great resource books by Fiona, Cassandra, and Monica. We have a 20% off discount code. Use the code CHANGE on the website, or just however you place orders with Red Leaf Press. This is going to be valid through the end of the month, and then it's going to go away. So make sure, if you have not gotten the resources yet, now is a great time to do that. Again, my name is Meredith Burks. I've got my email there in case you have any questions or feedback after today. One thing I do want to promote that is also a little bit different for Red Leaf Press is that we've started doing texting weekly activities. So you can sign up. It's free to sign up. Message and data rates may apply depending on your carrier, but you can sign up for Mondays, infants, toddlers, Wednesdays for preschool age, Fridays for school age. You can sign up right on our website. There's a link on our homepage. And they cover STEM, transitions, movement, literacy or pre-literacy, all sorts of different areas. And it is live now. We just launched it at the end of January, and it's off to a really great start. I'm really proud of it. So again, just trying to find other ways to support the early childhood field. The Red Leaf. Speaking of, we would love, speaking of surveys, which we did earlier a little bit, we definitely want to hear your feedback on this series and what else you may want to see. So this is the link. Once I close out, you'll be automatically sent to the survey page. It's very, very short. I think there are 4 questions. It's anonymous. If you don't want to be anonymous, you can certainly just email me any feedback or ideas. But we want to hear from you. So that is all I have. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate everyone logging in. Cassandra, Monica, Fiona, you guys are amazing. Your books are wonderful, and the series has been just a joy to work with you guys. So we look forward to doing more in the future.
Thank you.
And
just to
all the
reiterate,
panelists,
I see Susan asked us if we could do this again next year, and Cassandra said, we'd love to hear from you about if there's anything specific. So really kind of emphasizing that the survey, if you can fill that out and let us know if there's, you know, what would be most helpful, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
And thank you to all of the attendees for joining us. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you. And Carrie is the McCormick Center.